This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Hello everyone, this is Tony, Network Chief of We Made This. As you know, our podcast network brings together a brilliant assortment of talent who talk about all kinds of pop culture content, such as the episode you've just listened to, or maybe you're just about to listen to. We're not going anywhere, but we'd love to keep the lights on for even longer if you're able to support our network on Patreon. For just £2 a month, you get your name in lights and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping us produce more great audio. And for £3 a month, you'll get your name in lights, but you'll also get access to an exclusive bi-monthly podcast from the We Made This talent pool on podcasting, pop culture, and, well, you tell us. We'll take your suggestions. For less than the price of a coffee per month, you can help keep We Made This going. Just head to patreon.com/We Made This. That's patreon.com/We Made This. And get the ball rolling. Now, back to your scheduled programming.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello and welcome everyone to Shipwrecked Comatose, the Red Dwarf podcast on the We Made This podcast network. My name is Kurt North and welcome along to another episode of Season 4. We are currently on Season 4, Episode 2, which is DNA, aired on the 21st of February. What year? I hadn't put the year down. 1991. I had just turned 11 years old. My birthday's in February, and so I just turned 11 at this point. So, all good. Is directed by Ed By, as usual, written by Rob Grant and Doug Naylor. And with me, again, for the second week in a row, is obviously my co-host, Mr. Mark Adams. First on your phone list, Mark.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm all right, yeah. It's been minutes.
It's been minutes. We've had a break. We've had a lunch break and a full week. Remember, 7 days. As if. And joining us, Carl Bryan. Carl, how's it going, mate?
Not too bad. It may have been a week, but I'm still in the same clothes I was in last episode because it's on lockdown.
Well, yeah. What's the point in getting changed?
Exactly.
So, yeah, and I'm joining this. I'm usually at work, but I'm off for 2 weeks. So I'm seeing how the other half live. You know, all the other 3/4 of the world live at the moment. So it's all good.
Embracing your inner lister.
I'm embracing my inner lister, indeed. Absolutely, indeed. So, yeah, so we're going to be talking about DNA this week. Mark, what are your thoughts on this episode?
I really liked it. I think, as you touched on last week, 3 Crichton episodes in a row really does kind of establish him as a very important part of the cast. And I'm all for that because Crichton's brilliant and so is Robert Llewellyn.
Absolutely. Carl, general thoughts?
I really enjoyed this one. I think I said it last week. This series appears to be the start of some like long-running tropes. I think in this one it's the first use of novelty condom head. And think goalpost nostrils. I can't remember the nickname now that he gives him. But this series does seem to be a lot of starts of things that go on for a long time throughout the show. I really enjoyed this one. There's a lot in it. It's quite densely packed.
It is,
sort of joke wise as well.
It is, yeah, and it plays around with the tropes, doesn't it? With things like the RoboCop aspect, and you know, we mentioned Blade Runner last week and Star Trek last week as well, and you know there does seem to be a confidence, you know, like we were saying in season 3, there does seem to be a confidence. And these first two episodes, I apologize, are just really strong. You know, they're both really strong episodes, and it's going to be interesting to see where we go from here because we've got things like Dimension Jump coming up as well, you know, stuff like that, which is quite sci-fi. So the fact that they are going through this era of season 4, just being as confident as they are, really looks like it's gonna go right through the season and seed through the season, so that should be good. So without further ado, then let's dive straight into the episode. Okay, so we start off with the model shots. Now, we haven't really talked about models a lot recently. But what did you make to this, Carl, as an opener with just using the models for the start off?
I love the models. I say, thinking about this in terms of at the time, we're talking about the confidence may have come with sci-fi might have been on a bit of an uptick in television, because this would be when, I nearly said last generation, when Next Generation is hitting its stride.
It would have been about the third season, yeah, and season 3 is where Star Trek Next Generation starts to really pick up, yeah.
But I think the models match up and hold up well in comparison to Next Generation, which, if I'm right, isn't models, is it? It's
Next Generation is models.
It is models.
Yeah. It's only like Deep Space Nine, Voyager they start using CGI. Really,
yeah, but I think it holds up, and I think it gives them a bit of a boost, even though they were doing it first. It gives them a bit of a boost. And at the time, Next Generation was on its way to being one of the biggest shows on television at the moment. And Red Dwarf are doing the same thing in terms of, this is what our spaceship looks like. Whereas if it looked like, a cardboard box on a string, it would, essentially it's probably a cardboard box on a string, but it's a really well painted cardboard box on a string. I think that kind of put them side by side and go, what's that? Oh, that's Star Trek. What's that? That's Red Dwarf. Well, that looks good too, because, it looks the business. It's always been the little show that could, in terms of what it's capable of doing. It's always kind of exceeded what it should have done, especially with things like, that's a bread box painted white with holes in it now and light shone through and all that kind of thing.
I think that's to give Red Dwarf its credit for, as I say, we've mentioned about the Red Dwarf model, for example. It's just how well they actually do that kind of thing. We'll get very critical when we get into later seasons for obvious reasons. And some are actually funny, and others are just like, oh, why have they done that? And we've talked about the remasters as a perfect example of that. But what do you make to the whole model thing, Mark?
I've make it absolutely no secret that I'm much more of a fan of practical effects than I am of CG, particularly 90s CG. 90s CG was people being over ambitious and doing stuff that would have still been better had they done models. And I'm not a film knowledgey type, but wasn't CG insanely expensive in the 90s as well, and models would have been cheaper?
Yeah. No, definitely. And also models would have been way more established, so they would have had everything to make models there. Whereas with CG, they would be having to learn the technology, as they go. And it certainly wasn't cheap, and you certainly couldn't. I really doubt the BBC had more than a couple of stations where they could do CG, even if they had any at all.
Well, this is something I was going to mention, and I think it's probably because we're talking at the top of the hour about it. I think it's really worth mentioning the when Crichton is human, he rhymes off quite a few things with regards to split screen and focus and stuff like that. So I'm quite happy to let's talk about that scene that we're talking about this era. That he says, "I see, move your head closer to the object." And then he goes, what about other optical effects like split screen, slow motion, Quantel?
Yes. I've always wondered what Quantel is. I've never been quite sure.
Do you know what Quantel is? Have you looked? Okay.
No.
Quantel.
I haven't got a clue.
Okay, so Quantel. I'll put some images in the end. Now, there's a bit of a debate over this one. But if I said Money for Nothing, Sledgehammer, and the weather channels and stuff like that, Quantel was pretty much the Photoshop of the time. It was
right.
They were the ones that pretty much did all the effects on Money for Nothing. I know that's got some homophobic things in it. We'll sidetrack that for another story. Yes, I can see Mark's face. But yeah, we've got things like Sledgehammer and all those kind of practical new digital effects of things being in front of screens and stuff like that. And I'm wondering if Quantel was put in there because of some of the effects that we have later in this episode with likes of the RoboCop aspect and the screen on top. So Quantel were really well known for this type of thing. They were designed for like title credit cards and all that kind of thing. They were a company from Berkshire in England, and they were created basically a box called Paint Box, which is your Photoshop, really. And in 1996, 1997, they tried to sue Adobe because Photoshop was against Quantel, and Quantel lost that battle. And then Quantel was still around, early 2000s, but I think have since gone. So that's where that comes from.
Right, so maybe if they were doing a remaster, rather than shit CGI, they should say Adobe whatever instead of Quantel.
Yeah. If it was in modern times, you'd probably have them saying Photoshop. Really,
that makes sense then, because I thought they just made it up as like their prediction of the name of the next thing. I'd never heard of Quantel.
Yeah, it's more of a BBC production or a production company. So like your Industrial Light and Magic. So they were like a company that focused on special effects and after effects for TV shows and movies and stuff. They were just generally a production company, but then they created like this box, that's all it did. And it was something daft, like it was worth 130 grand per box or something.
That's fascinating, isn't it? We talk about how the show ages with jokes about Helen Shapiro and Peter Beardsley. But at least as, early 40s guy, I've heard of those and get those jokes. I completely missed that one.
It was something that was in the back of my mind. Every time I hear this episode, I'm like, Quantel, I've heard that, but I can't remember exactly what it was. And if you search for it on YouTube, you'll find all kinds of like promotional videos for them and, the showcase and what they've did. And I remember this video quite vividly when I watched it the other night of a small helicopter going round the processing board of a Quantel computer. So they were actually using the effects of this person going on a helicopter ride as using Quantel to actually design it so you can see what the capabilities of Quantel was. But as I say, it's something that just goes right over the top of most people's heads. And it was a really unusual kind of comment on that. And I'm not even sure obviously I was 11 at the time, but I'm not even sure it was public knowledge at that point. So it's just really interesting that it feels to me almost like product placement more than anything else.
Or an in-joke.
Yeah.
I was going to say maybe they got something free for mentioning Quantel.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a sidebar. So we start after the model making. We're in the scanning room, and there's lots of indistinguishable chatter, which I always find quite interesting. I don't know about you, Mark, but it's like King's Speech, Jurassic Park, Delivery Man. Go on. What do you make of it?
I want to know what they're saying because, I've done like background stuff in acting before where when you're actually doing that kind of thing, you find yourself going, yes, I'm just talking to you in a completely and utterly pointless way. I'm just talking. This is me talking. I'm also talking, but I'm talking and I'm talking. And the person you're talking to will go, yes, you're talking and I'm talking as well. So I wonder whether there was actually lines or they were just told chatter. And it's so incomprehensible. I couldn't work it out.
Yeah, but do you make? I mean, I've just like rambled there, but I've looked at my DVD collection and just selected random films on the wall. But what did you make to it, Carl? Because it is I find it quite off-putting because it's like they are just. It's not because they're not background like Mark says. They're not background. They're our main characters going.
Yeah, it's strange because there's the thing of, they're showing that, they're working really hard in trying to do something. But at the same time, they're all talking over each other. And it can't be productive. It's very strange. It made me think of in Hot Fuzz, they talked about, they never show the paperwork side of things. This to me was Red Dwarf kind of doing that in them showing them reading off coordinates and trying to do this and that and the other, when normally like Holly's already done it or something like that.
Yeah.
It was interesting, and it was just complete gibberish to me. It just didn't make sense why they would be talking over each other at top speed. And also it kind of shows that Lister has evolved more than what he was before, because Rimmer's supposed to be an engineer and Lister's not really. He's kind of an engineering technician in name only. But just seeing them work together, it almost seemed out of sorts that they were competent.
Yeah. I think you're right. It does suggest they're more competent than it's ever suggested before.
Well, yeah, it does and it doesn't, because I think, ironically, that the body swap episode does it a lot better. Yeah, just as taking out of context, the body swap, you could put the beginning of body swap when they're trying to find the self-destruct button, and it would work just as well. It would just be an exact copy of that. But this one seems to be a bit more like, ooh, because it's like, there's a UFO, right? So I can imagine this episode being better suited for body swap because there's more panic. Whereas this one's like, you're only looking at a UFO.
Yeah, I think they're kind of trying to emphasize how busy the team is for the gag that's coming up. Yeah. But it could have been done differently. And it does kind of undermine Holly's previous skill as well, in a weird way.
A strange thing about it is, to me, it blatantly shows Rimmer's in charge. Yeah. And him being sort of stood over and this, that, and the other. And it kind of shows that every so often they will drop the, right, we're winding each other up in space to, right, we need to get this done now. So Rimmer's going to do this, I'm going to do that, Crichton's going to do that. And, they can work as a unit if needs be.
Yeah.
But it just seems very urgent out of nowhere.
Anyway, you mentioned about the actual end gag, Mark. I mean, what do you think to Kat's couple of gags in this one?
I howled. If you've ever had a shared house, you've ever been someone living with other people, the socket argument is definitely a thing. It is definitely a thing. My house at the moment, we've got far too many plug boards. We really shouldn't have as many plug boards as we've got. And I don't think other people call them plug boards. What do other people call them?
There's 4 bars, 4 ways, plug board. I call them plug boards.
I like plug board.
Extensions.
4-way extension is probably less of a weirdo way of putting it, but we've got so many sodding plug boards, and there's never enough sockets, even in modern houses that have, like, you got to remember, like, houses like the house I live in, built in the 80s, had no real computer with a printer and a monitor and a whatever that thing is that makes the internet better for me that I can't remember the name of.
Router.
One of them, yeah. So 80s houses have one fucking plug per room. And so this, you got to remember when this was made, this was big time for people in shared houses at the time. Even now, you never have enough plugs.
No.
And it's a universal gag that will last forever.
It is, and it's the right person as well. Just the fact of the whole vanity thing, isn't it? It's just, it's an amazing couple of lines that he does. And obviously during this one, we mentioned it last week. He said, "This is beyond belief. A spaceship that's 5 miles long and they don't fit enough plug sockets in the scanning room." Which is perfect, as you say. It's perfect to say that you're in the most important room in the thing. And we get this in even in modern life. I mean, my work actually went the complete opposite way. And we installed a new children's play area where the old one was, refurbed it. And they put up benches on the back and they put plugs in every single thing. So there's like 50,000 plugs on the back. But they didn't think that people haven't got a table in front of them. So they put drinks by the side of the plug boards. So it was like, nope, we've got to cap them all off because it's too dangerous.
For fuck's sake.
It was just like, oh, God, no, why have they done that? Why have they done that? They should have asked somebody with a health and safety conscious mind. Because, what can you do?
I used to work in libraries, and again, libraries were built in the 50s, 60s, goodness knows when, and laptops weren't a thing. There are not enough plugs in any of the libraries in Trafford. I can tell you that with an absolute certainty. And again, like our house, the staff area is full of plug boards.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? I would ask Mark this, but I'm a bit frightened with the answer. But Carl, what do you think to your bikini line?
It's surprisingly neat.
Not wavery then.
No, never wavery. Oh no, I've got standards.
Well, I used to, but then, lockdown, can't go out of the house. Mine's shocking, Kurt.
Oh, it's just it totally plays up to Cat's vanity, doesn't it? I mean, it's just fantastically done, and the fact that he has to use gel in the end, which is kind of like very early 90s, which I did used to be able to use gel. No longer.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Well, I vaguely remember hair, and in the 90s I had curtains. I don't deserve hair.
Well, no, I tried to do curtains. I tried to do a moulder curtain, but didn't work. In
the 90s, I had a big, as I think everybody did at some point in their childhood, had a big sort of hairstyle change. And I kind of went from just having sort of curly, sort of fluffy hair to I had basically spikes, just combed back spikes. And I was so happy with it. But my goodness, I got through a lot of that bright blue cheap hair gel. Like, I'm not surprised I've got no hair now.
Yeah.
But
if it's the same hair gel I'm thinking of, it was just so like watered down jelly.
Oh, it was horrible. And it smelt. You walked around all day with your head smelling of that.
Yeah. The things we do for vanity, yeah. Things we do when we're younger.
What do you mean? I've got more vein as I've got older. Fastidious old queen.
Yeah, well, what you need is Rimmer's and is what do you call it, wig? Ace Rimmer's rig. That'll do you. So you have to source that before we get to like smoke me a kipper.
I've been bald so long, I just couldn't pull off a syrup unless I cut ties with everyone I've ever known, because everyone would know it was a fucking syrup of figs.
I just like the idea that on your business card you've got Mark Adams, humanist celebrant, facetious old queen.
I mean, both of those things are accurate descriptions of me.
You just say what you see at the end of the day. So back in the scanning room anyway, and Glenn Miller is mentioned. Now, this is interesting because this is something that I mentioned on the X-Files podcast that I'll do. I know, before you say anything, I'm not going to mention what it is and where you can find it.
I've heard of the X-Files.
Yes. In season 6, when they moved to LA, contemporary kind of comments were made, things like Spice Girls, Bill Clinton, and that whole Monica Lewinsky issue. But in earlier seasons, they were mentioning more things like Buddy Holly and like that. And we've mentioned it on here as well, things that they've used like you mentioned before, Peter Beardsley, for example. Glenn Miller and Marilyn Monroe, which is something that was mentioned recently as well, they are more like old school, longer, will last longer in the age because they've been there for so long. But using Glenn Miller, Mark, is an interesting one in itself, really, because that is quite a stretch, really.
It's an odd one because as a kid who grew up in the 80s, my granddad was, in his late 60s, early 70s, in the 80s. He loved Glenn Miller, so it was something that I would have got and people perhaps a little older than me would have got. But my parents weren't into Glenn Miller, they were into Motown. So if I had kids, my kids would know Motown because their grandparents would be in it. So again, it's dated because it's the granddads of the people that were watching in 1991. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, but I think someone like Marilyn Monroe, is, renowned the world over. It's someone that most people will have heard of. But someone like Glenn Miller, it's a bit more nuanced. It just feels like, so. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, hang on, I've heard of Queen Elizabeth II. I've never heard of like this Glenn Miller. Who's that? That's my only issue with it. Yes, it's an older reference, and it's not more of a contemporary, which will date quickly. For like, if you mention Aha, for example, I
love Aha.
Nothing wrong with Aha. There's nothing wrong with Aha.
Morton Harkett. He's been hot for 40 years.
But yeah, I'll clock that one. But Carl,
Sorry, give me a minute to have a think about Morton Harkett. Ooh. Ooh.
Would you like him to take on you?
Oh, yes.
So just saying the references in this one, just popping back to last week's episode, they made reference to Carl Walden, who's an actor from the 50s, I think. When Crichton says, look at Carl Walden, he was hideous and a famous actor. Like, no idea who that is.
Yeah,
No, I had to look that guy up as well. He wasn't particularly ugly, I didn't think.
No, but Lister also makes reference to St. Elsewhere, which I thought was a really strange reference to make. And I think this series seems to be, I don't know whether it's a 90s thing, but making kind of references to other things in pop culture, because I don't notice it as much in later series. And it dates this series a little bit, I think, making reference to these things. I think the Glenn Miller thing, because wasn't there something about aliens with Glenn Miller?
Was there? That might make more sense.
Because he disappeared, didn't he? He vanished.
Did he?
Yeah, I'm sure that's why the joke's made, is that Glenn Miller vanished, and it's never really been explained what happened to him.
Glenn Miller's plane mystery revived after 70 years, so his plane must have gone missing.
Yeah.
So Bermuda Triangle shit.
Yeah. It's that sort of, as soon he disappeared, and everybody, of course, a lot of people would be like, aliens, immediately, because, no plane was never found or anything like that, so...
Glenn Miller was the guy who did that one.
Yeah.
I couldn't name another one.
No.
I couldn't name that one, actually. It's the one that goes...
In the mood, I think.
I'm trying to think. Who was the musician? His name was Rocky something, who thought he was taken by aliens. Rocky Erickson. He was an American musician from the 13th floor elevators, and he believed where was it? Alien years. In 1974, after being released from a state hospital, Erickson formed a new band which he called Bleib Alien. Bleib is an anagram of Bible, and the phrase in German, therefore, remaining alone. The new band was renamed Rocky Erickson the Aliens because he believed that he was abducted by aliens and brought back and was an alien.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised I've not used that before. But yeah, that's 13th floor elevators is really an interesting little side note on that, to talk about people being taken. But I didn't realize about the Glenn Miller thing, and that makes a lot more sense. Yeah, so the fact that he seems to distaste Glenn Miller anyway, because obviously the voiceover, which works quite well, says, "We don't want him, go away," which I thought was quite good. So then we get to the kind of thing of Rimmer and Kat in their discussion, because we don't see Rimmer and Kat together that often, do we? And I thought that was quite interesting, is that that we've got like Rimmer saying about this sort of saying you're totally egocentric, you flee at the first sign of trouble, which is like, that's pretty much what Rimmer is. You only have to look after number one. Yeah, you're so vain. Not sure he's vain. Not sure Rimmer's vain.
I think Rimmer is vain, actually. A lot of his stuff with his uniform has to be perfect and stuff like that. He's vain in a different way, but it's still vanity. And while we're talking about vanity, damn Kat's outfit.
Well, it's just all of his best features, Mark. That's all it is.
Silver jacket with tassels. Want.
Yeah. It's what series is it where Danny John Jules reckons the budget got cut for his costumes because he starts wearing the same things again?
Yeah.
I think it's 6. He's like, the budget got cut for my costumes. He's like, you had a good run. Let's be fair.
Yeah. But it's interesting how Rimmer's like, no, I'm going with Crichton. I'm not going with him. It's true, and it's interesting how it's like almost like a mirror of them both, because he's like rhyming off all this stuff, and I'm going, sounds like Rimmer, sounds like Rimmer, sounds like Rimmer. And then the way the cat does turn around and goes, hey, you just naming all my best features, which I thought was quite nice.
Which I think is important, because the cat owns it and Rimmer doesn't, and that's the gag, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I also like that we haven't established yet the light bee. That's later on this series. But I like the fact that Rimmer's still terrified that something's going to happen to him.
Yeah.
When, as far as we know so far, nothing can happen to him because he's a hologram. And we've not established yet that there is a way to kill him, essentially. But
yeah, I mean,
we don't know what that is.
Well, speaking of that, because then in the next scene in these corridors that they're on the ship, is the physical comedy that we get with Crichton, who's the perfect person to do this for physical. Crichton is probably one of the best for physical comedy. And we mentioned last week in season 7, there's one of my favourite moments of Crichton is when he says, "Don't hold me back," and he does like the funny walk of Kachansky in later seasons, and it's brilliant. And then this actual scene is repeated in season 8 as well by trying to protect somebody in the group, and the fact that why can't you be front and back, and then you just do this shuffle. I just think it's brilliantly done, and I think the two of them, it's Chris Barry and Robert Llewellyn are the two perfect people to be doing that.
I think you're right that this is a good gag that is made into an excellent gag by the way it's acted by Robert Llewellyn with the kind of slightly shonky mechanoid walk. He very much is Crichton now. There were some stages in series 3 where, we've talked about how they cut scenes because he got the accent wrong. And there were some other scenes that were fine, but he hadn't quite got Crichton exact. He is on his game. He is on a roll. He is Crichton now, and it benefits from that.
What did you make to this scene, Carl? Because, as I say, it's a nice one for the two of them, because this seems to be like the ensemble. You mentioned this last week. The ensemble seems to be coming together now. It seems to be that they have definitely found their boys from the dwarf aspect.
Yeah, and I think because it's good that Rimmer and Crichton have sort of paired up in like their own little subgroup almost, because we've had the Cat and Lister be that in previous years with the Smart Party and things like that. And I think it works well for the personalities. We also had it in backwards with the Sensational Reverse brothers. But now they seem to be... I think I mentioned it in the Crichton episode back in 2. Crichton is Rimmer's hands, essentially. Crichton is Rimmer's connection to the rest of the world. And having them together... I don't know whether it makes the character of Rimmer feel whole, because, like I said, he can't get hurt, as far as we're aware, but he's still terrified, and he and Crichton are looking to protect each other, but protect Rimmer. And I think it's nice that they've got that kind of almost hierarchy between them. Like, Crichton will defend Rimmer if needed, even if he is a massive smeehee. Yeah.
But then we go and find out. I mean, talking about the fact that you've got that happening, that you've got like the Rimmer aspect, and you're saying he can't get hurt. But, he does have a hideously malformed triple-headed skeleton with putrefied flesh hanging off from it fall through himself, and he says he's just found out what shirt tails are for, which is a nice voiceover gag.
I think as retcons go, the light bee, and assuming it's always been there from the very beginning, does kind of explain to some extent why Rimmer's always been a massive coward, when really it was implicit until the light bee that, well, he can't be hurt because he's incorporeal.
Yeah. But then on the top, but he can be mentally hurt because because obviously having a triple-headed thing come through your body, and then to cry out for your mother, which I actually howled at, because that is something that a lot of things of people have said, that you cry for your mother, in that kind of times, and it's the way that Crichton just says, "So shall I cancel the order to find your mother?"
It's so deadpan. It's so deadpan. Yeah. And it's a play on a classic gag delivered in a sweet, naive, mean way by Crichton, who I don't think he... Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like a Crichton style refreshes an old gag.
Yeah. It's the step away, isn't it? It's kind of like he's just shall I cancel the order? It's like, oh god, that's so funny.
It's very Crichton. It's very deadpan. That does mean changing the bulb kind of level of Crichton gag, isn't it?
Yeah.
I noticed as well. I think it's the only time I've ever heard it. Is he calls him Rimmer?
Does he drop the
Instead of
Mr. Rimmer?
Yeah, he says it fell through Rimmer.
Yeah.
Okay, so missed that.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, yeah. Well,
it sounds really weird to me. Anyway, we're not calling him, Mr. Rimmer, sir, or something like that. But
the three-headed thing. Again, going back to my love of practical effects, this is a model, and it's a fucking good model. It looks like a dead body with three heads, and it's great. It's a proper prop, and I love that shit. I wouldn't have thought that it probably would be CGI if it was made now, and that would be a shame. I think a lot of skill when it comes to practical effects and model making has just been lost.
Yeah, I do think there is a bit of a renaissance on it a little bit, though. If you look at likes of Christopher Nolan tries to do as little as physically possible and wants it on screen. And
Grogu as well was a puppet in The Mandalorian, which I genuinely believe it benefited from.
Yeah, yeah. So there is this element of that kind of art coming back. I think Dark Crystal was back to puppets, wasn't it?
True.
As well. So
puppets that were notoriously painful for the people doing them. Yeah. Actually, you had to arch your back and put your hand out to be the head for the what were they called? Skeksis.
Yeah,
and suffering for your art. There's something about that I feel just makes it better than CGI bird people.
I think for me, one of the things that kind of showed it was coming back a bit was BB-8.
Yeah.
In the last three Star Wars, because everyone looked at it and they went, "Oh, that's CG," and they went, "No, that's a model that works." And we're going to have the toy out by Christmas.
Oh, and BB-8 was running around all the stages on the first episode, wasn't he? They rode him out, literally,
which is cool.
And it's still an impressive looking thing because obviously it's a sphere. Is it another sphere on top, or is it a flat?
It's like a half sphere. It's kind of cut halfway along the actual. It's like a D in a football box.
Yeah, that to me is still really impressive.
I think there was a huge amount of backlash in Star Wars for the poor CG on the remastered versions. I suppose a lot like Red Dwarf when you think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I still am yet to pick up the Blu-rays, but I know that they cleaned up quite a bit of stuff in these Blu-rays from what I'm aware. And there's a couple of shots later on in this episode of green screen, which I'm wondering if they've cleaned it up to make it wouldn't even be a big sort of like some of the remastered stuff does. It wouldn't be a massive thing where you'd notice, but if they just tidied it up a little bit to make it look a little bit smoother,
right?
If you get what I mean.
That's good remastering. That's the kind of remastering I can get down with. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it when it comes to the models, I suppose.
Yeah. I suppose it's like the HD remasters for going over the original film and increasing the definition and stuff. Not Buffy style, of course. But because that's its own mess. And Star Trek obviously did it. I think we mentioned that recently. But yeah, so when we actually we kind of come onto the whole Lister and Cat thing in the DNA room, and the fact that Cat is just keeps tapping those buttons. We talked about this when we were talking about things that you're trying to cancel. Sort of record a cancel. And going back to, body swap, cancel.
Yeah.
Cancel. Cat's going, "Oh, made a mistake. I'll fix it. No, don't touch it. I'll fix it. It's okay. Yeah. Don't touch it. Get Crichton."
I think that this gag is, like I said, when we were talking about body swap, people don't fucking learn. And the fact that they can put the same gag in 5-6 episodes later and it works is because people don't fucking learn. I certainly don't.
I remember seeing this as it came out, And I remember rolling on the floor laughing just at Craig Charles's delivery of touch nothing, do nothing, get Crichton. Just really trying to lay it down. And I still find it funny to this day, especially the fact that the cat's adamant, like, that we don't need novelty condom heads to bail us out. That could have been almost a bit of a message to some of the fans, like, we don't need Crichton for everything. He's not just a exposition like, I can get us out of it. And of course he can't.
No.
Yeah.
He just can't.
But what we do need is we need Crichton as an exposition machine, because the very next scene, or the scenes around this, is Crichton and Rimmer moving the story forward, because he talks about the reason why the skeleton's got 3 heads and stuff like that, and it's some sort of thing has happened, and he's very much like in exposition mode at that point, and that all goes in between the original first off of like, oh, what's happening? Oh, I'm in a shield. There's a middle bit, and then after that is when we actually changed Lister.
I think as far as exposition goes, there's always an excuse for why it's needed. The fact that it's a robot who is accidentally a little bit patronising at least makes the exposition fun.
Yeah. I think it's not. I wouldn't say it's detriment to the episode. I think it works quite well here. It's not like sometimes it has to be for a reason. For like example, Whitehall. Yeah, you have to explain that. There's no other way around being able to go, what's a white hole? You've got to be able to do that.
Yeah.
With this one feels quite organic, because it's like we're trying to find out as they are what's going on. And then, but the whole this guy belonging to a video club card, and they didn't recognise him, which I thought was which was quite nice, because obviously we're not getting to the point of changing the DNA at this point. It's like, you mean they've got a picture of this person and they don't know who it is.
I just like it seemed to be a very 90s thing to me, of having the wallet of 1 billion cards for literally everything you could ever possibly do. You've got a card for it. I did enjoy that. I remember watching, I think it's on the DVD of this, for this episode, one of the deleted scenes is them discovering the body. And I think they discard it because it's a bit naff. And I think the way that they've used it in the reveal of him afterwards is much better. Because it's literally, I think Crichton opens a door and it opens, and then the body, like, it's blatantly a stagehand just pushing it towards the camera. And it just looks it's very apparent that this model does not move.
A little bit shit haunted house styly.
Yeah. But I do like having grown up in a video shop, the fact you mentioned the video club card, it's like, oh, I remember those. Like, childhood spent next to the laminator, putting the video club cards in and making them for all the customers. Yes, very much memory.
And we used to have, talking about libraries, we used to have a club, the area which I live in is called Harrowby. And we used to have a library card, which was like a weekly Tuesday night, club as such. And it was called Harry's. So we used to have that laminated and, have your picture up there and say, hey, I'm going to Harry's now. I'm about to say the amount of cards that people had, and still a lot of people still have now as well. They still have them, but
I've minimised recently, and I feel super modern for it.
Have you got them on your phone now though?
I have. That's why I feel all modern and grown up and 21st century guy.
I've still got my national insurance card.
Mine's in a drawer.
Yeah,
mine's coated in sellotape. Just over the years, I've just put sellotape on it to strengthen it until it eventually dies.
I feel sorry for people who never got a card and just got that stupid-ass letter. There's something like, almost like a rites of passage of getting your national insurance card. And we do live in a world where things are becoming more electronic, not just like communication on Zoom or whatever, but like, there is something about the tactile nature of a card that, particularly in 1991, everybody knew about these cards that you had for fucking everything, like your membership card for the Blockbuster. And it was a really timely gag that is it does date it, and this is one that I'm genuinely sad about, that it dates it.
Other video stores were available.
Were there? Well, yeah, there was like the local news agency ones, like Carl worked in.
Global Video was another one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there was a Global near us, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a local supermarket for me. You like, it was like, like a corner shop, but a slightly bigger.
Yeah.
With videos.
Like a mini mart.
Yeah, brilliant. And my mum would go shopping and leave us to look at the videos, and then she wouldn't let us have one. Devoed.
When we transmogrify, I can't even say that word.
Transmogrification.
Yes, I was going to mention the language and the way it's the voiceover, because we get episodes like Justice coming soon as well. It's very much like, you will do this. Transmogrification accepted. DNA sequencing.
Can I ask you a question about the voiceover? Did you find it surprisingly hilarious with a man's voice coming out of Holly's mouth? Or was that just me?
Maybe just you.
I don't know why, but, she's normally so scatty. And then transmogrification. I don't know why, but I was howling. Absolutely howling, and I don't know why.
Yeah, I think I remember it being odd the first time I saw it, I remember thinking that Holly's head against that multicoloured background looked great. It just looked more sci-fi. It's always when they encounter other ships that the other ships look better than Red Dwarf.
I think that's probably deliberate. But the other thing I loved about this scene, again, howling, was the panic circuits joke where he just then goes, "Oh!" It was wonderful. just wonderful.
He just lays out his own build-up for it as well, doesn't he? He's sort of like, and with the beep, the countdown going on behind him, the timing of it's just spot on.
It's the way he says, whoops.
Also, his brain's got organic bits in. It's kind of skirted over, but that's really fucking icky and really something they don't go into. But in other science fiction, the kind of ethics of having organic matter in robots would be a huge deal. I mean, obviously it's because they need to transmogrify him, but it's never, to my knowledge, or at least not in the first 6 series, never looked at again that there is a small organic element to a mechanoid, or at least to the 4000 series mechanoids.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I was going to bring up, because it's like, it's like kind of cyborg kind of aspect. There must be some sort of...
Oh, technically,
matter. Yeah, so I thought it was interesting that they're using it for a plot point, which I found like, it's kind of like there, but as you said, I don't think it's ever mentioned again.
I find the idea of cyborgs fascinating because technically I'm a cyborg. Because, a cyborg is an organic human being or an organic creature that is enhanced by tech, right?
Okay, I don't like the way this is going.
Well, when my...
What have you enhanced, Mark?
Well, my broken jaw. When someone smashed my face in and I had an operation to put a piece of titanium in me, that is permanent. I have a piece of metal in my face for the rest of my life. It's a shit cyborg, but I'm still a fucking cyborg. Yeah,
my other half had her jaw was kind of like down. The bottom part of her jaw was down. So they have to she had her jaw broken in 4 places and plates put in to pull it back. So she's a cyborg as well. She used to get called Terminator all the time.
My dad has got he had problems with cataracts, so he's got like plastic lenses in his eyes now. And when I called my dad a cyborg, he wasn't chuffed.
I'll have to double check with him, but one of my best friends, when we were about 19, he got attacked by a gang. And they had to put 13 plates in his face.
Shit, me.
To put him back together. And I don't know if he was joking. Part of me thinks he is joking, but he went, technically, he kind of went over the line to be qualifies as cyborg, because basically all of this is metal.
Wow.
Pretty much.
But it's weird, isn't it? The cyborg thing, you think about people enhanced. So, I don't know, someone loses an arm, they get like a metal arm. But right down to me joking about the fact that I've got a plate in my face makes me a cyborg or my dad's eyes. But you don't think about it the other way. Something that's just got a tiny amount of organic matter in mostly mechanoid or metal or robot or whatever. But it's all cyborg. I just find it a little bit minging that this character that is a robot, it's very much established that he is a mechanoid, robot, whatever you want to call it, a droid, has got a little bit of person in him.
It's not clear, because I think what a lot of us are thinking is that it's human brain, aren't we? That's kind of what it leans on. It could be something else, but I kind of think it adds a bit almost to the endearing nature of Crichton in that he's the way he is and how he cares and things like that is because he is a little bit human as well. It's that kind of adds to it.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
It's something you'd gloss over though, because it's essentially there to allow for this episode to happen. But if you take a step back, like we regularly do on this podcast now, there's a lot more to it if you want there to be, or you can just ignore it and move on to the lols.
Yeah,
it's the 13 regenerations thing, isn't it? You can either lean into it after you've mentioned it a couple of times before, or you can just go, don't know what you're talking about. And Doctor Who, because they've just because the fan base wouldn't let it go, have kind of had to lean into it and play around with it and skirt round it. Whereas Red Dwarf have gone like, Crichton's got organic part of his brain, but we're never going to mention it again.
Yeah, exactly that, Carl.
Yeah.
Well, the Doctor can regenerate as many times as they want now, apparently, but that's another story. That's another story. Just while you were talking about Holly as well before, it reminded me of something that happened recently. This was like back end of January 2021. Did anyone see Baroness Buscombe in the House of Lords recently?
Yes,
No.
I know what you're talking about, yes.
So Baroness Buscombe, because we're all Zooming at the moment because of that horrible pandemic that happened in 2020 and 2021, was doing her statement from the House of Lords. She was zooming in. Now, she's not got the best lighting, but she's got the ultimate lighting on her face, and the rest of it is black.
So she looked like Holly.
She looks like Holly.
Brilliant.
You need to have a look at it. It's amazing. So it's Baroness Buscombe. No doubt, by the time this comes out, if you search it on Google or something like that, it'll probably pop up.
Yeah, I'll chuck it on
amazing.
the socials. I'll chuck it on Twitter when the episode goes up.
Yeah, but it is absolutely amazing. It's just it looks like an older version of Holly.
Brilliant.
She's like talking. It's just like that.
Brilliant.
It's brilliant. Anyway, so let's move on. So we've got the whoops. We've talked about the turning organic, and Lister then changing into a chicken and hoping for an epidural.
Wonderful.
And turning into a hamster.
Wonderful.
You love it.
Just wonderful. I think, like, when we saw the polymorph, the choice of what the polymorph morphed into is really well thought out to make it visually funny. And that happens again here. Whereas they could have picked anything for him to morph into, but a chicken, brilliant. Why chicken? No one fucking cares.
Yeah, and for the beer gut, joke as well. The fact that it's it's got a beer gut, and the way that Rimmer, again, we were talking about Rimmer how in Time Slides was getting a bit of glee from it. He gets a bit of glee from this one as well, Carl, doesn't he?
Yeah, can we turn him back? Do we want to? I think it's I'm sure it's coincidence, but ties in, like last episode we were talking about how they're watching Tales of the Riverbank, The Next Generation, talking about Hammy Hamster, and then the very next episode Lister gets turned into a hamster.
Somebody likes hamsters.
As well. Yeah. Maybe it was the thing like Paul Jackson or Ed Byers, like, what animals can we get? Sort of some poor production assistant's gone out into the night, come back, I've got a chicken and a hamster.
Yeah. Oh, I've got a chicken on my farm. Oh, I've got a hamster. Right, we'll use them. That'll do. Oh, it's brilliant. It's fantastic. So the fact that they're changing into a hammer, where'd that come from? A hamster. The fact that it also describes, actually, because he's saying that it was that painful, he needed an epidural. I mean, that must have been severe pain for him as well. It's not only the case it's for a laugh. It's actually the way you're saying it was like, it was really, that was to ask for an epidural or wanting an epidural at that point. Is really interesting. How would you feel being a chicken and being in that much pain, Mark?
I've no idea. What an odd question.
Come on, Mark, get into the mind of a chicken.
No? Okay. I'm just thinking, if you wanted to try and lay an egg, how would you feel?
I don't think I'd enjoy it very much. What do you want me to say?
The thing was, Lister sort of saying like, "Oh, I need an epidural," and this, that, and the other. He's also given birth to twins by this point.
That's true.
That's very true.
So he probably he had an epidural that time, so he knows what they feel like.
Yeah. So
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
So Crichton, I'm human. That's where we get to, and we come back to Red Dwarf.
Shout out here for Robert Llewellyn's face. Love the face. Love the way he kind of still he portrays a mechanoid getting used to a human face in the way that only Robert Llewellyn could. I defy any other actor to do it better than that. Shout out to Robert Llewellyn's face.
Yeah, we can always shout out to Robert Llewellyn's face. Not a problem. He's now in happiness mode, so he's still, as you say, he's still in Crichton, mode as well, because he's saying no happiness mode, and this comes in a bit of time, and I'll talk deeper about this in a second. But it says, I've never experienced anything like this before, except for one time I accidentally welded my grono socket to a front-loading washing machine. Which is a lovely little joke. And then Holly as well. Holly seems to be a bit enamoured with some physiology as well, doesn't she?
It's weird because it's almost like there's a strange unrequited romance between Holly and Crichton. When she gets him the gift in the last day, there's a genuine kind of tenderness there between them. And then in this, she's sneaking a peek of him, giving him the once over when she's trying to establish whether he's healthy or not. Yeah, it shows that it's the one team up we never really got throughout the show, because obviously Holly's sort of is confined to being on a screen or whatever.
That's true. Yeah. They never put female Holly on the telly to walk around like they did with male Holly.
Because it normally goes with Crichton, doesn't it?
Oh, it's true. Crichton's tummy. Good point.
She does get to float around, though.
She does. She does later on in this series.
But a white hole. We're going to have fun recording that episode. So, yes, I'm just going to quickly, briefly go over the next few scenes, because I think it asks the question of a bigger question, really, with this. It's that his nipples don't work. He can't get Jazz FM. He talks about the groinal socket, and you can talk about that in a second, so don't worry about that. And then you've got the Lister with the smirking when he looks, obviously, at the Polaroid and the double Polaroid, which is all fantastic stuff.
So the thing about the nipples not working, I've had sex with guys like that.
Dead air.
One of my favourite bits in this whole scene is Robert Llewellyn's delivery of Jazz FM.
Jazz FM.
Jazz FM.
Which must allude to the whole Glenn Miller thing as well a little bit. The fact it's kind of in the same kind of realm.
So the whole thing with the double Polaroid, right?
Yeah.
As a gay, right, a lot of gays send dick pics on Grindr, so it's almost desensitized. And let's be blunt, if you're on a scene, you've slept with a lot of your friends as well. So most of us have seen each other's cocks. But I guess for heterosexual people, it's quite a thing to see each other's cocks. Is that right? I'm trying to understand.
Not really. I think it's the fact that it's a double Polaroid. It's, because how big are we talking? How big's a Polaroid picture? 2.5, 3 inches. So, and for it to be a double Polaroid, we're probably talking. It's some length, isn't it? That's what we're talking about here.
Serious insight there, Carl. Well done.
Yeah,
it's some length. Holly seems to like it.
Yeah,
and then obviously we get the peeping Tom aspect a bit later on. So
I like the fact that they're being quite sensible about it, and I don't think at the time many sitcoms would say penis, especially British ones, because that's just not what you say.
Yeah.
But I'm an enlightened 21st century guy, Crichton. You could tell me anything. And the fact that it doesn't turn into a massive giggle fest, even though Lister does smirk at it, when he says, "Oh, can we not talk about these things?" And Lister goes, "No, we can. Yeah, we can." I thought that was kind of refreshing.
Craig Charles's face is brilliant, though. He gets it completely right.
Smirk. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what I was getting to actually was the thing that Lister starts to say about this. He's either now one thing or the other. He gets erotically aroused by catalogs, which obviously is a reference to what some people might go to the lingerie section on catalogs, for example. But he's using the old Black and Decker catalogs or whatever to get his ride off. But what I find really interesting with this episode moving forward in general is Crichton's state of mind, because towards the back end of this scene, when we get the joke into how do you get too mechanized, he's dissing mechanoid straight off the bat, and he starts to lose grip of reality and who he is and why he is, and then obviously we go to the spare heads as well towards the end, and it gets quite dark and it gets quite his Crichton state of mind on this is really interesting. Mark, I don't know what you think to that overall. With that,
I did think about this as, and I know I've already joked about Grindr and cocks, but I did think about this as a metaphor for coming out, and I'm not sure it is. There is an element of when you come out, you kind of try and find your community and reject straight people and all that kind of thing, and then you realise that's a stupid idea, and particularly in the 90s, that would have been something that people did more than they do now. It's less of a deal, isn't it, being gay now than it was in 1991. So I wonder whether that was the intention or just a kind of happy coincidence. But there was some kind of parallel and some kind of vague metaphor for coming out. And I think it handles it really, really well. There's just no reason to reject what you used to be because you've discovered another element of who you are, Yeah,
I mean, what do you make to it, Carl, with the fact that it's like, as I say, it's got the, he's neither one thing or the other, and he's like being overbearing, he's leaning too far one way, to, almost like to distance himself so far, because he's gone, no, that was the old me, and I'm going to do this way, and his state of mind does come to play a lot, and it does get quite deep.
Yeah, it kind of made me think of as someone who was like a, say, working class person who'd won the lottery, if you get what I mean.
Yes.
Like won like millions and millions of pounds, and turned up at with Sparehead 3 as well, having the voice that it does, like turns up at your working class parents' house in your incredibly designed suit, and going like, look at this is great. Oh, I'm everything I ever wanted. And you've got the fake teeth and the hair's done and all this. And they look at you like, well, you're not. That's not you. We know what you are. And you're like, no, this is me now. I kind of felt it. I kind of equated it to that a little bit. And the fact that also, if you meet someone who's also rich, you try and be rich, which I think is what Crichton was doing with Lister, and like, oh, fellow human, things like that, I'm trying to think that episode of Futurama where they all get $300 and Zoidberg thinks he's rich, and then when he meets the other rich people, he realizes he's nothing like them at all. And if you get what I mean with the sort of metaphor there,
I think that's a stronger metaphor. The other one I might consider as a comparison is apostates. As someone who kind of, sort of, vaguely, kind of grew up in a Church of England-ish background, but no pressure at all. My transition to acknowledging and understanding my own atheism and humanism was basically a click of the fingers. But for people who come from very strong religious backgrounds who are actually apostates rather than kind of just moved away from something never really believed, they really seem to dislike religion more than I do. Again, I'm stereotyping and I'm generalizing, but the transition from strict religious background to humanism is a bigger one. And it's comparable to mechanoid to human in a weird way. And there's no real need to hate on people who aren't what you used to be, but it sometimes takes a while to get used to that.
Yeah, I mean, you've only got to look at. You can bring in another thing with which gives me the pleasure of saying this. It brings class into it because he talks about wine bar, wine. Talked about wine because Lister starts talking about how he feels like he was because he went into a wine bar once. He was defying his class. So I think this part of the episode, along with all the analogies that we've talked about there's a lot of this like trying to be one thing, but you're still where your roots are from, and you feel like you're defying the way you've come from. And I think Lister like opening up at this point is a really interesting one, that he's trying to, pass that knowledge on to Cryan to make him understand, because he's saying like you're neither one thing and the other. You're not. You can't be this. You've got to be who you are, really, and that's what I think what he's trying to get at.
Do you have a wine bar, something that you wouldn't go to or wouldn't do because you feel it would betray your class or your background?
Well, I mentioned the other week about things like the assemblies when I was younger. Things like that I wouldn't do. I wouldn't necessarily say I've got anything like that. I am. Going to a wine bar isn't something that I would particularly want to do. If being that particular example, it's not something I'm quite happy in a pub. Give me a pub, sit down in a bar. You know what I mean? I'm not.
But you wouldn't actively resist a wine bar like Lister did. Do you have something you would actively resist?
Yes, there's certain. I don't know. I'm guessing they're still going, but from working in pubs, I'd meet some societal groups, and I actually mean sort of man-made societies. Like one, there would be the Young Farmers Association, and they tended to be quite aloof and quite sort of they'd look down on other people. And to me, because my family were farmers, it was like, that doesn't sound like anything like sort of a farming family, but they seem to be kind of like the rich kids of farmers. Yeah, and if I was ever invited to one of those, I'd turn it down, not because I'm like in touch with my farming roots. I'm the first generation that didn't grow up on the farm, but it feels like a betrayal of what people before them did, almost. Well, I'm sure they do work.
I know what you're saying, because I've played at multitude of Young Farmers dues with the band. So I can see where you're coming from.
I think for me, I really don't want to go into conservative clubs. I'm vitriolically anti-Tory. Let's very quickly skirt over it. I'm just going to say Section 28. I am so anti-Tory that I really don't want to go into a conservative club. When I got gigs as a wrestling announcer and it was in a conservative club, I felt dirty. So I do understand the reference that it's not wine bars. I'm happy in a wine bar, but I do understand what the point of what Lister is saying here, because I don't know, it felt like a betrayal to my principles for a 30 quid gig.
Yeah. No, I can see that. I can totally see that. And I'd say probably the most thing I'm closest to would be those assemblies or going to church and things like that. That I just was totally against.
Yeah, I'm not a big one about going to. I used to do wedding videos or be part of a crew that did wedding videos, and it didn't bother me going into churches, but like sometimes you'd be told things like you can't stand here, or you can't do this, or you can't do that. I was like, why is that? Oh, because you're stood on holy ground. It's like, well, my tripod's an inanimate object. I don't think its belief system will ruin yours. But if anything, I've got more of an opinion than this tripod. So I think things like that. I'm not a religious person, and churches are not my
I wouldn't
thing.
work in a church, but I'd work in a deconsecrated church. I would do a ceremony I'm a humanist celebrant. As a celebrant, I would do a ceremony in a deconsecrated church. But out of respect to the religion, rather than being uncomfortable, I wouldn't want to do a ceremony in a church. But I've got no problem sitting at someone's wedding at all in a church.
No. I went to the church one of the churches in Derby, got turned into a Chinese buffet.
Splendid.
Yeah. It's a church again now.
I mean, to be fair, as I say, I think I mentioned this the other week. I've mellowed on that, and I will go now. But I was very kind of opinionated when I was younger, and it was just one thing. But I've mellowed on that now. I'd still want to have like something more along the kin of what you do, Mark, for my funeral, for example. My brother had the same sort of thing, so it'd be very much like that rather than anything churchy. And I would be like, do not under any circumstances sing any hymns. It'd be like that for me. There's definitely stuff like that I would want to make sure that was right for me.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably where I would go. I'd say I don't want anything put on me as a person, even if I've gone.
Yeah, I agree.
That would be that. So yeah, that's the kind of thing I would say. Moving on a little bit then, we just a little bit, because I think therefore I am.
Yeah, but that's not what he said, is it?
Oh, well, no, because that's what he's trying to get to. He gets to the 1980s Robin Williams Popeye.
It's Gloria Gaynor. I
it's
don't know where all this Popeye shit comes from. It's Gloria fucking Gaynor. I am what I am. I did mention a few times gay. That's a fucking gay fucking anthem.
You know how you said about things being desensitized?
Yeah.
Well, me and Carl are completely desensitized to you saying it. We don't even hear you say it anymore.
Yeah.
You're just Mark.
Thanks.
That's all you are. It's all right. It's no problem. But you are right. I've just seen those earphones that he's wearing, and they do look like rather large earrings. So
I have three earrings anyway.
Or that he's got the slick backed hair at the back, but
the mullet
on top.
I don't have a mullet.
Anyway, if God intended us to fly, he would have invented Spanish air. He wouldn't have invented Spanish air travel. And the whole the I am what I am, therefore I am. I think therefore I am. Everything all melded into I am. It's quite a philosophical debate. And again, going back to what we were just saying, it is a philosophical debate about Crichton. Is he human? That's a question that I would ask. Is Crichton human at this point in time? Because he's not one thing or the other.
So I don't believe in the soul. So I come at this from a very different point of view to people who do believe that the soul is the important part of what you are. And I don't think it matters. I think that if someone or something can feel emotion, then those emotions are valid. I know damn well that my cat can feel love, disappointment, and grumpiness. And
hunger.
And anger. And
hunger.
Oh, and definitely hunger. And I can empathise with my cat, even though, she's not as bright as I am. But she clearly has feelings. And I guess that's all that matters.
No, it's right. I mean, if you're made out of dandruff, though, Which is a gag I do recall as one of those ones where, it's not necessarily a quotable Red Dwarf. It's quotable in the fact of quoting the joke, but I don't think I've ever quoted it in any kind of speech or anything. But it is a joke that I remember through the ages of like, what, men medicate with shampoo? He would wash with medicated shampoo. He'd wash away, which I thought was brilliant. I thought it was a great line.
Brilliant stuff.
I like the fact that Rimmer's thought about it. So when Cat just go, you'll disappear. It's like, no, that's not what's going to happen. It's going to be this. It's going to be fine. It's like Rimmer's gone off and had a very quick power think about what the best thing to do would be. And yeah.
So there's a discussion about parts of your body that you'd improve during this. So obviously, we did mention I am quite a fastidious man on the previous episode. I kind of prioritised what I'd improve. If I had 1 up to 5 different things that I would prioritise, would you, before I go into that, would either of you improve something about your body if you could through this transmogrification technique?
Oh, yeah.
Just improve body.
Yeah.
As in, like, it's not changed to a chicken.
No. I mean, I'd want to be a chicken for half hour to see what it was like, but I'd want to go back.
Okay, probably, yeah. I mean, I would try and improve my fitness for start off. That'll probably be the first thing. Potentially, have some form of decent hair.
See, I thought about hair as well, but then I realised, and it might be because of fucking masks and glasses, out of everything, I want 20/20 more than anything. More than I want a bigger cock, I want 20/20 vision.
See, my vision's all right, so I don't have an issue with that. I think generally my fitness, because I think my fitness levels are so far down, and I'm not as sprightly as I used to be, and because I'm not naturally a person that goes out and gets fit. I don't like running. I don't like going out and doing things like that. I don't like going to the gym or anything like that. I do like to play football and I do like to play tennis. And that naturally keeps me fit, but I don't have enough time to do it all. So ideally, I'd like to be able to play tennis 3 times a week, play football a couple of times a week, and just keep that going. Now, obviously, some of my knee joints, like we've discussed before, about, living in someone's body, things that you've kind of got wrong with you can impact that. Because I used to be able to play football 3 or 4 times a week. Now I wouldn't know what the hell I'd be like. But
so would you
until
prefer?
Recently, there'd be 2 days I can play 2 games, and my knee would be so like swollen or tight I couldn't play again.
Would you prefer to revisit the transmogrificator many, many times to maintain a fitness level, or would you prefer a one-shot deal where it improved your knee so you could play football again?
Probably many, many times.
How about you, Carl?
Huge cock. Huge. No, I'd probably go for 1 shot just to sort of fix everything and then just take it from there, really. And maybe come back if needed. But I quite like the idea of just going, right, that's all sorted, let's go. And
true.
Because there's a chance of it ballsing up the second time anyway. So if I get it right first time, then I'm happy.
When you think about it, this is actually a machine that could give you immortality. You could live for 25 years and then go back and improve everything back to what it was those 25 years previously and do it ad infinitum. I was actually talking about one thing at a time, but you're right. You could just literally use this machine to live forever. Where do I get one?
On a UFO, which Glenn Miller was taken on.
But
that's where you get.
That'd be freaky.
We all joked about cocks and having a bigger cock. Cock was 4th on my list. I thought it'd be higher than that, but as I thought about it, it was 4th, behind eyes, teeth, and hair.
I like the thought that you were disappointed in yourself that cock was only 4th on looking in the mirror, just like, Mark, what's become of you?
He's done a proper analysis on himself and gone, oh, I'm
I
disappointed.
think 20-year-old me would have been cock first. But, things have deteriorated in my 40s. Whereas my cock's still doing all right.
Oh, that's on your gravestone.
I'll tell you what, it's a fucking essay on my gravestone, the shit I come out with.
Oh, man. Anyway, let's get back to the episode. Let's
Sorry,
get back
yeah.
to the episode. Another thing that they touch upon, only very, 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 very briefly, is the typical knee-jerk techno-fear reaction. So the fear of things like, say, when the atom bomb was created, things like that. Because there is a bit of an element to this in this episode as well. When they talk about the philosophy, and it's Rimmer that says that. It's like, your fear of this technical age, and that's something that's very, it's one sentence that Rimmer says, but it's really pertinent to philosophy, isn't it?
It's different now. The current techno fear is different to 90s techno fear, but I do feel like it's a universal, continuous fear that is something that we talk about how often things have aged. That doesn't age at all. It just evolves.
I mean, at the moment, as Tom recording, the vaccinations are starting to go out for the pandemic that's currently happening in 2021, and some people have gone. The thing that gets me is the people who are tweeting out on their iPhones, so I'm not having the vaccination because it may have GPS in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
that is amazing, and the people, the amount of, because they're the type of people that'll be the next thing. It's almost, in some ways, it's almost like jumping on the bandwagon as such. It's like, oh, what can I conspire against now? You know what I mean? Because next week it will be the iPhone. Next week they'll say about something. It's like, you do realize what's in your phone. What's capable, what your phone is physically capable of. I mean, I'm very much a person, like, I've got my location turned on so that people can find me. You know what I mean? If something drastic happened to me, my other half can basically press a button and go, there he is, and know exactly where I'm at or where my phone is.
Most of these people that complain about the bloody vaccine might have GPS in don't even realise that they've got their fucking location on their phone. They probably, they probably launched Grindr just before they complained about that shit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or whatever. What's that one that's like Grindr on hard mode? Tinder.
Yeah. Yeah. And all the other kind of things which we don't know about.
I saw a thing recently where it's like, if you've used a nightclub toilet, then you're going to be fine having a vaccine.
It's not wrong, Carl.
Anyway, and if you've had a mutton vindaloo, then that will kill anything.
I love a mutton vindaloo. Well, I did before veggie. Paneer vindaloo. Get it in me.
I do love paneer.
Ooh.
Yeah.
But the same shit happens to the same person twice. You've got to love a Die Hard reference as well.
Absolutely.
Which I thought was great, and obviously then the actual convenience of the cans being there to smash the glass, and then we get to the final bit. So, mutton vindaloo, the mutton monster, and did it work? which makes me howl every single time about it.
How did the producers of RoboCop not sue?
It's blatant, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know with some of these things, like, we need to make it look legally distinct enough that they can't. But you take one look at that and going, no, that's RoboCop.
He even walks
that
like
really
RoboCop.
Is.
Yeah.
But
I
want to shout out again, practical effects. The monster explosion is proper good practical effects. I am a connoisseur of the horror film from this period of time, and this is as good as any horror film's practical effects.
It's Peter Ragg, isn't it? It's. I mean, he's right the way through. I think up until the Dave era. I think he's in a few of the early ones. And then he also did things like Bottom, and I think he did the Young Ones, and any British sitcom that required an explosion's Peter Ragg. And he does such good jobs on these. And
I think it's interesting to compare those practical effects to the green screen. The practical effects are fine. They look fine on our screen now, nearly 30 years later. whereas the green screen looks like ropey 80s green screen.
Yeah.
The perspective seems to be out on it as well. The three of them stood there looking, and then where Lister is standing, the eye lines and stuff don't match up as either. And that's one of the things I'm interested to see if the Blu-rays have cleaned it up a bit, just to, the halo that you get around people on these things, and just sort of seeing if that's been cleaned up a bit. It's the side of the things I can imagine the fandom aren't like, no, don't do that. It's like, no, clean that. That's fine.
Yeah, just let's make it a bit neater. It'll be all right,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, for years I've loved this joke. I've loved the fact that they've created this mutton monster, that the mutton monster goes after them, that they're being attacked by that creature, and lager.
That's wonderful.
The only thing that can destroy a Vindaloo. I just absolutely love that line. I have always loved that line.
Yeah, I love the fact that the audience almost groans.
What do you mean almost? Definitely groans. Well, don't care though. It's a fun groan.
Yeah. I like, we slightly jumped over one of my favourite Rimmer jokes in this, which is, you go, I'll cover you. Seriously?
No.
Just all the, I love a gag when sort of three or four of them will say something in unison to one person. I just love that kind of joke.
Nope.
I will take umbrage with, has anybody got a poppadom the size of Lake Michigan? You need naan bread with mutton vindaloo. Not a poppadom.
Yeah.
Poppadom is for mango chutney and raita.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I realise that that's a minor detail to be umpty about, but
Part of me wonders if we'd mentioned it before in Camille, how everything seems to wrap up in about a minute. And it kind of does it here as well. But part of me wonders if there was another bit of an ending going on, because it seems like an odd line to go out, this guy's pure class. It works, but it kind of makes me think, was there something else that was supposed to be the full ending? But I don't know.
I mean, it's probably alluding to the fact of his wine bar story, isn't it? That's what it's trying to get at.
Yeah,
that's what it's trying to get at, the fact that he's pure class, because he's the only way. Only Lister could have come across or worked out that.
Yeah,
that he was the only one out of the four of them would have worked out that you could destroy a Vindaloo with lager.
lager.
And the fact they do the callback to Polymorph, where it says, "Remember this time last year, you were attacked by Killer Shami Kebab,"
which was a nice thing that they did that.
Yeah. And as I say, then obviously the Die Hard line comes in straight after that, which is great. It's great that they've done
the
that.
middle finger joke as well. It's almost like a joke that doesn't need to be there, but they put it in because they knew it'd get a laugh.
Yeah.
Just Craig Charles's chubby finger pressed against the glass.
Oh, brilliant. And that brings the episode to an end. So is there anything I may have missed? Any final thoughts, Carl?
I think we've got it all pretty covered there. I do like the fact that in this series we do see a visible jump in how things are looking.
They're looking nice.
They are looking like we're going off ship a bit more this series, as the next episodes will come up there. But the quality of the actual episodes has gone up, and I think the writing has switched a bit to where it's kind of got a formula, but that formula works. If you get what I mean. When we've mentioned in these past two episodes that it does wrap up quite quickly at the end, but the density of gags and things going on, they're packing a lot into 25 minutes. And you wouldn't think that'd be the case with when they sort of said, oh, don't do a sci-fi sitcom when it first launched. The amount of stuff they're fitting in there that's not even necessarily sci-fi themed, like relationship stuff and moral questions and things like that. It's so much is going on, and it's only going to get better over the next couple of series.
Yep, absolutely. Mark?
I think I'd agree with Carl completely about the density of it all and how it doesn't feel forced. It feels right, how they've They've made the perfect fucking cake. But the one random thing that popped into my head at the end of the episode, I'm not into collecting memorabilia and props and shit like that from fandom at all. I haven't got anything like that. Although I do know the guy who owns the Candyman suit from the Happiness Patrol in Doctor Who.
Yes, you mentioned that before to us.
Cool.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah.
If I decided on one piece of memorabilia that I would like from Red Dwarf, I think I'd have to go a long way to find something I'd want more than the giant lager can. That giant lager can as a coffee table in your fucking living room. What a talking piece. I want it. I wonder where it is. And if anyone's listening that's got it, sell it me. I'll give you 50 quid.
I always thought you'd want the cat's zebra jacket.
I'd put it on a coat hanger and it would sit there, whereas every day I'd have my giant lager can coffee table in the living room.
True.
What an interesting one. I don't know what I would have. Yeah, I'd have to think about that and maybe come back next week. There's bound to be something. Yeah, so that all brings the episode to an end. We will be back next week, Mark.
We will.
Carl, you'll be back next season or potentially in specials, no matter what's happening in the end of season 4. Mark covers all that crap.
Yeah, I'll definitely be back.
I don't know what we got planned for season 4, mid-season 4. Do we know yet?
No.
Have we worked that out yet?
Don't think so.
To be announced then, Yeah. So, Carl, in the meanwhile, though, if people wanted to find out where they to see, if they wanted to hear more of you, where can people find you online?
I have an All My Links page, which links to, say, pretty much everything I'm up to. The short film night I help run, the quiz night I do, all the other podcasts I do, including the Cerebral Jukebox, which is also one We Made This, and the new one I'm doing, which is called That Went Nowhere with my friend Alison Matthews. And that's allmylinks.com/Mr. Carl.
Excellent stuff. And Mark, where can people find you on that there internet?
Well, my personal Twitter and Instagram is @MarkAdamsHC. If you're interested in the celebrant work that we vaguely touched on earlier, you can have a look at my website, which is humanist.org.uk/Mark Adams. And I've got 3 podcasts as well as this. One about tattoos @Ink Stories Pod on Twitter, one about kids TV @RITC Pod on Twitter, and one about my job as a celebrant @Life's Milestones on Twitter.
Excellent. You can find me and all my podcasts on Twitter @RMuldrake. That's RMULDRAKE. Recently being on the podcast 616, which is about the Marvel Universe, covering WandaVision for myself. That's at podcast 616. Find me over on the X-Files podcast, the Xcast. That's the X_cast on Twitter as well. And then you can find me on the Millennium podcast, which is the Time Is Now pod on Twitter as well. And you can find me on various other things like Star Trek Picard, Make It So, which is at Jean-Luc Podard. But follow me on Muldrake. That's probably the best place to go. And I will get a spiel eventually for how many podcasts I'm on, until we decide to do more. And then
that's the thing. We're always on guest spots on We Made This as well, aren't we? I've been on Carl's podcast. I'm probably going to come on your podcast. And I've been on Matt's podcast and Colin's podcast. And we just fucking like podcasts, innit?
Yeah, and we've got a network. So, and we network. That's the whole point of a network.
Indeed. We Made This Pod on Twitter.
We Made This Pod on Twitter, yeah, which will be in the notes at the end. But next week, we're going to look at 1,167 counts of murder. So it's a bit grimmer than this week. We're going to be covering justice. So we'll see you over there. But until next time, remember, everyone.
I never realised you were gay, Mark.
Elsewhere on We Made This.
The giddy carousel of pop.
We find ourselves in the Hammersmith Odeon with Dave Rimmer. He's backstage, deep in the murky bowels of the Odeon. All is not well, writes Dave. Somebody has got the Gap band's trousers mixed up in their dressing room. Charlie, one of the 3 Wilson brothers, who are the nucleus of the Gaps, holds up a silvery sequined pair of strides that no sane human being would be seen dead in. "These aren't my shingles," he exclaims disgustedly. "These are Robert's." He throws them down.
It's the fact that they call them the missing Baco foil keks.
That's what really made me laugh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and spangly combat gear. So there's a kind of, the fashion correspondent is working overtime.
We Buy Records.
We're now officially in the sunlit uplands of post-Brexit sovereign Britain. So we thought it might be fun to sort of take a tour around those sunlit uplands of post-Brexit sovereign Britain and see how that relates to buying and selling records. Because it's going to be good, right? They had what? They had four years to sort of figure it out.
Let's stay positive and hope that all of the emails we've had on this subject are positive, shall we?
We dig music.
The Instrumentals album, they almost do work as meditations. It's more music that I can add to my sad yoga core genre.
Oh, I tell you what, right? I messaged Colin about this earlier because this is the first time I got to the Instrumentals. But considering you hate noodly nonsense, this is noodly f***ing nonsense. Like, how long is that first track?
The thing is, they were improvised tracks.
You can tell.
Yeah.
Like, not in a. I'm not saying that in a negative way because she's a fantastic player. But if you were to look up self-indulgent in a dictionary, this would be one of the pictures.
Yeah, we've both picked up on this. You are never, ever, ever, ever allowed to complain about something being noodly again.
Okay,
nope.
I promise.
Because this is the definition of it. And it's great. We like noodly stuff.
Yeah.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at We Made This Pod.